Within the shadowed maternity wards of old Vienna, death lingered close and inescapable like a heavy lingering fog. Ignaz Semmelweis uncovered a shocking life-changing secret hidden behind medical ignorance, yet he paid the cruelest price with his own fragile life. He humbly begged proud doctors to cleanse their hands before tending the sick, only to be cast aside as a delusional heretic trapped in the cold chains of public doubt. Tonight, beneath the soft gentle glow of warm flickering hearth fire, we step into the lonely epic story of this forgotten savior of countless mothers and innocent newborn lives. Many of humanity's most vital life-saving truths emerge drenched in fresh blood and wrapped in bitter ironic tragedy. Ignaz Semmelweis, the visionary pioneer who first unlocked the hidden mysteries of infection control and sterile medical practice, met his tragic end at the hands of arrogant, close-minded peers blinded by outdated pride and stubborn prejudice. His life unfolds as a quiet, haunting tale of lonely perseverance, unyielding moral conviction, and the terrifying dark depths of human ignorance, vanity, and willful blindness. Close your eyes gently and follow this soft, soothing narration, drifting back through shadowed, forgotten decades, revisiting those somber, uncertain years, balanced precariously between the brilliant insight of genius and the cruel label of madness. He is remembered forever as a selfless saint etched into the sacred pages of medical history, and also as one of the most heartbreaking defeated visionaries the world has ever known. Ignaz Semmelweis devoted his entire existence to proving the simple life-saving power of clean hands and basic sanitation, yet he perished in cold, desolate confinement, trapped inside a bleak prison cell, consumed by hopeless despair and unspoken sorrow. On this calm, quiet evening, may this solemn, timeless tribute crossing distant generations invite you to pause and reflect upon the true weight of human civilization. Progress and rational thought sink slowly into peaceful reflection amid gentle, unrushed narration, and embrace the long-delayed justice and tender compassion that history has finally granted to this misunderstood, lonely prophet. Pause for a moment and picture a place meant solely for joy, new beginnings, and the tender cry of incoming life, shrouded constantly by the thick, oppressive shadow of inevitable death. Throughout the 1840s, within the crowded halls of Vienna General Hospital, young expectant mothers would kneel trembling and desperate before labor began, whispering quiet, fearful prayers, begging fate not to send them into the dreaded first maternity ward. Within that cursed wing, 1 out of every 5 young women would fall victim to the brutal, deadly fever known as childbed fever, their bodies burning with unrelenting fever, flesh rapidly decaying, organs failing one by one until they slipped silently into hopeless, permanent death. The most respected medical minds of that era stood utterly helpless against this cruel, mysterious plague, unable to identify its cause or halt its deadly spread. Learned scholars and senior physicians blamed strange star alignments, foul, toxic miasma drifting through city air, and unavoidable bad fortune, accepting the endless loss of young mothers as an unchangeable act of fate and divine will. It was not until a thoughtful, observant young medical assistant named Ignaz Semmelweis turned his careful gaze toward the unwashed, blood-stained hands of practicing doctors that the darkest secret of 19th-century medicine finally began to unravel. Tonight, accompanied by the soft, steady flicker of cottage firelight, we follow this gentle, unhurried story and walk slowly through every sorrowful, defining chapter of his extraordinary life. This is a sorrowful, profound narrative revealing how clear rational truth can be strangled and destroyed by mass ignorance and arrogant pride, and how a compassionate, selfless savior can be broken and sacrificed by the very world he struggled tirelessly to protect while he fought desperately to cleanse the hidden, unseen blood and contamination haunting hospital halls. A stubborn, arrogant world chose to shut its eyes, close its mind, and lock the doors leading toward reason, progress, and basic human kindness. Breathe slow and calm in this quiet hour and journey backward into that gray, bleak age long before antiseptic liquid, sterile tools, and modern medical sanitation ever existed. Ignaz Semmelweis was never born to be a rebellious radical or a defiant challenger of long-standing medical tradition. He was simply a gentle, caring, ordinary doctor, unable to bear the endless sorrow of watching helpless young mothers die needless, tragic deaths day after day. Inside the notorious First Maternity Division of Vienna General Hospital, he witnessed heartbreak and loss as vibrant young lives withered away one after another. Meanwhile, just next door, within the second maternity ward, managed entirely by female midwives, the mortality rate remained astonishingly low, with few fatal fevers or sudden fatal infections. This stark, unexplainable contrast pierced his heart like a sharp poison thorn, lingering in his thoughts day and night. Could it truly be that untrained, humble midwives possessed greater skill, wisdom, and careful care than highly educated, respected medical doctors holding official doctoral titles and prestigious professional status, driven by relentless compassion and Urgent curiosity, he began comparing and examining every small differing detail between the two wards, studying patient positioning, room ventilation, daily routines, environmental conditions, and even the ringing of church bells as local priests passed through hospital corridors, searching endlessly for the hidden key behind such devastating loss. In 1847, his closest friend and fellow physician Dr. Kolechka suffered a small accidental cut from a sharp scalpel while performing a routine cadaver dissection. Soon after, he fell deathly ill and passed away, displaying every painful identical symptom of the deadly childbed fever sweeping through the maternity wards. In that devastating, heartbreaking instant, a sudden flash of clarity struck Semmelweis like crashing thunder, echoing through his mind. Senior doctors regularly performed autopsies and dissections on diseased corpses, then directly examined vulnerable, laboring women without washing or cleansing their hands in between. Those hands, praised and revered as noble, skilled and trustworthy, carried invisible deadly corpse particles, unseen contamination and hidden infectious matter, turning trusted medical caregivers into unwitting agents of death, wielding an invisible scythe that cut short countless young lives. Overwhelmed by desperate urgency, he rushed directly into every hospital ward, forcing every doctor, student and medical staff member to thoroughly scrub their hands in strong chlorine solution, scrubbing repeatedly until every trace of rot blood and foul organic odor faded completely. The quiet, simple act of mandatory hand washing brought forth an immediate, breathtaking miracle. The maternity ward mortality rate plummeted sharply, dropping from 18% down to less than 1% overnight. Yet he could never have imagined that the cleaner and purer those professional hands became, the faster the powerful forces of mainstream medicine would rise up to crush, isolate and destroy him utterly. Within the refined social circles of 19th-century Vienna, doctors stood as respected, dignified gentlemen, unquestioned authorities held in high public esteem, granted unwavering trust and reverence by society at every level. Semmelweis's groundbreaking discovery and uncompromising public declaration struck every practicing physician across Europe as a humiliating, unforgivable insult. His words implied, directly and unapologetically, that respected, distinguished doctors were careless, unclean murderers responsible for the unnecessary, painful deaths of countless innocent, vulnerable women. Established medical authorities, long accustomed to wearing blood-stained work robes as proud symbols of extensive experience, seasoned practice and professional legacy, burned with overwhelming shame, bitter anger and wounded vanity. They refused outright to accept the radical, unsettling idea that tiny, invisible, microscopic particles could carry fatal disease, ending strong, healthy lives, nor would they ever admit their refined, gentlemanly hands could harbor hidden filth, decay and deadly contamination. His former mentor, the powerful, influential Professor Klein, launched a cruel, relentless campaign of professional retaliation and systematic suppression, stripping Semmelweis of his official assistant title, cutting off his career progress and blocking every path to professional recognition. Trapped within the cold, unforgiving hospital hallways, Semmelweis stopped every passing physician, pleading, earnestly begging them to wash their hands, urging them to open their eyes, recognize the truth and spare countless suffering mothers from certain death. In return he received nothing but cruel, mocking laughter, cold, disdainful glances, public humiliation and the cruel, unshakable label of a dangerous, delusional madman. Crushed, defeated and professionally exiled, he was forced to flee Vienna, abandoning his position and fleeing to his hometown of Budapest. Even in his new home he continued promoting strict sanitation protocols and compulsory hand-washing, saving countless lives. Yet deep emotional wounds, growing isolation and endless public rejection slowly fractured his fragile mental stability. He began writing desperate, impassioned letters to famous, respected doctors across all of Europe, abandoning gentle restraint and calm reasoning to cry out in urgent, furious accusation, "You are all cold-blooded murderers. This senseless, preventable slaughter must stop forever." To his horrified contemporaries, this desperate, impassioned persistence stood as undeniable proof of irreversible mental decline. Yet deep within his heart he only suffered unbearable torment, haunted endlessly by the countless innocent lives that could have been saved if arrogant ignorance had not blocked the path of simple, life-saving truth. Severe, prolonged isolation is a corrosive, silent force capable of slowly eating away at human spirit and eroding inner peace, especially when that lonely separation stems from possessing sole, unshakable knowledge of an ignored universal truth. Ignaz Semmelweis grew increasingly withdrawn, restless and mentally unsettled as years of rejection, mockery and suppression wore away his once steady mind. He would stop random strangers on busy city streets, passionately explaining invisible germs and deadly infection. He would pace alone in dark, empty rooms, screaming in quiet rage at his own reflection, trapped beneath the crushing weight of unheard truth and endless, helpless guilt. In 1865 his worried family and closest friends deceived him with gentle lies, luring him under the false pretense of visiting a newly built modern hospital and quietly delivering him into the locked walls of a Vienna psychiatric asylum. The moment he realized the cruel betrayal and understood he had been Trapped and confined like a dangerous madman, he fought desperately to break free and escape. The asylum guards overpowered him, brutally pinning his body against cold hard ground, beating him harshly and leaving him injured and weakened. In cruel tragic irony, during his violent struggle a deep wound opened on the middle finger of his right hand, the very hand that had spent years urging the world toward cleanliness, healing and life-saving care. The unclean, diseased environment of the neglected asylum infected his open wound, rapidly spreading deadly bacteria through his bloodstream. Lacking modern antibiotics, sterile treatment and basic medical sanitation, his body succumbed swiftly to severe blood poisoning, sepsis, the exact same cruel infectious root cause behind the childbed fever he had spent his entire life fighting to defeat and eliminate alone. Terrified and forgotten, he curled in agonizing pain upon the cold iron bed of his confined asylum cell, surrounded by suffocating silence, empty neglect and the bitter cold indifference of a world that refused to understand. Near the final fragile moments of his short broken life, his thoughts likely drifted back to those quiet hospital wards, the suffering mothers and silent deaths he had fought so hard to prevent. He departed this world before reaching 50 years old, sacrificed upon the cold lonely altar of unaccepted, misunderstood truth, bound by cruel inescapable fate and heartbreaking injustice. Less than 20 years following Ignaz Semmelweis's lonely tragic death, Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch successfully confirmed and established the fundamental germ theory of disease, providing undeniable scientific proof of invisible bacteria infection and sanitation. The entire global medical community finally embraced routine hand washing, strict antiseptic measures and thorough hospital sanitation, sweeping childbed fever into near extinction across all civilized nations. Looking backward through the clear lens of history, people finally understood the true magnitude of this quiet, misunderstood visionary. Recognizing his boundless compassion, brilliant foresight and unbearable suffering, statues were erected in his honor within Budapest and across European medical centers. His final resting place marked with an honorable inscription naming him the beloved savior of mothers. Returning to the haunting scene from the opening of his story, modern medical staff now perform careful, thorough hand scrubbing before every surgery and patient interaction, a sacred, timeless medical ritual born directly from his suffering, sacrifice and unyielding conviction. Every gentle flow of running water cleansing human fingertips carries forward a quiet, silent tribute, crossing centuries, honoring the lonely, brave prophet the world once abandoned and condemned. Semmelweis gifted humanity far more than a simple life-saving routine of hand washing. He left behind an eternal, profound lesson, boundless compassion for vulnerable, fragile human life and unbreakable courage to speak painful, unpopular truth amid overwhelming ignorance and arrogant resistance. Whenever you feel misunderstood, isolated or unappreciated, trapped within a world that refuses to listen, pause and remember those red raw hands soaked for hours in harsh cleansing solution, driven only by kindness, mercy and a desperate desire to end unnecessary suffering. Universal truth may face long delay, cruel suppression and bitter injustice, yet time always washes away the dust of ignorance, clearing the path for clarity, healing and lasting good. Now the night outside grows deep and calm. The ancient bells of distant Vienna have long faded into quiet memory, and every old wound struggle and silent protest fades into gentle stillness. Release the heavy weariness of your long day and drift into quiet, peaceful rest, just as the countless fragile lives he protected and saved once did surrender into a pure, tranquil dream, free from fear, prejudice and cruel misunderstanding. Rest softly and peacefully. Good night.